Hello everyone and welcome. It's Eclectic Kelpie, where we dive into the treasure trove of fantastical media, and on this, the last day of 2025, on New Year's Eve, we are doing a special reading recap and book review for all the books that I read this year. I had a goal of 12 books, which I'm very excited to say that I actually surpassed and did 13. It kind of seems like a small number compared to like people who are reading 100 plus books or, 50 plus books during the year. But for me, I have dyslexia, I'm a pretty slow reader, so I was really, really proud of myself that I was actually able to read 13 books, more than my goal, which was just 12. So yeah, I'm feeling really good about it. We're gonna discuss all 13 books that I read this year. Now let's dive into the episode. So, as I was reading throughout the year, I really wanted to keep a reading journal. Like I do in my bookended format, I wrote all of my thoughts and everything in, sections of general overview, my likes, my dislikes, my wishes, the tropes, my final thoughts, and then I've just recently added a quote section because I've only just started doing this and I really enjoyed it. So we kind of progress in detail as we go, because Quicksilver was my first book of the year, and then we ended on While the Dark Remains. So it very much goes from here's just little snippets up to full paragraphs and full pages of thoughts and opinions and stuff, because as I was going, I just got a lot more in depth and I was finding new things to have commentary on and different thought processes as I was going, because I was reading a lot more critically in terms of what I wanted to take away from the books and how I wanted to absorb them. But yeah, so we're gonna go on a little journey of my reading in 2025, and I will be doing really small little reviews, and then I do have a playlist called Bookended where I do a lot more in-depth and detailed long-form reviews of books. I don't have one for every single book that I've done, just Quicksilver, The Bridge Kingdom, and the Shadow of the Tenebris Court series. The format that I do reviews in is my general synopsis, then what I loved, what I disliked, what I wish for, the tropes, my final thoughts, and then I've just recently added quotes that I've really enjoyed in the books. So we're going to be going through all of that with the 13 books that I did read this year. So yeah, let's jump in. So the first book that I read this year was Quicksilver by Callie Hart, and I had the physical copy of this book, which is so nice, but now I'm sad because I got Brimstone in the special edition, and so now they don't match, and it's a travesty, so I don't know. I'll have to figure that out. Or I'll just have to have mismatched books, and that'll just be fine. But yeah, so for Quicksilver, I gave it 4 stars out of 5, and 3 little flames, which is my spice rating, out of 5. I loved the world, I loved the pacing, I loved the descriptions, I loved the writing style, I loved the environment, I loved the real depictions of mythological fae, so the can't lie, mischievousness, that sort of thing. I loved her pantheon of gods, her god system was so much fun. And yeah, overall, it was a very good book. And then the things that I didn't like was that Kingfisher was super disrespectful, walking away from Cyrus, just not treating her very well. And I found that as I get older, I have very, very low capacity now for f***ery. I just don't, I just don't, I'm fine with an enemies to lovers, but I just can't deal with being awful, and I don't think that that's attractive. And then if seriously, if Kingfisher was treating me the way that he was treating Cyrus, I would have just nope. I'm not this is not happening. But that's also why we have fiction and real life, and we can enjoy these things in a conceptual way versus don't actually let people treat you badly in real life. So but anyways, I just really didn't like Kingfisher as a love interest, and I didn't like him as a book person. I don't really feel like his redeemability was there by the end. I feel like he just, they tried to excuse his behavior and give it a reason, and I even kind of justify his behavior. I did a whole Kingfisher has dementia. Deep dive into his character psychology, which, yes, can account for the aggression that he exhibits, but still, still unacceptable. Didn't like him. Denya also. Some of these characters were just like straight up belligerent, and I just can't get behind that. It's the same thing with how I feel about like Bryce in the Crescent City books. I just can't get behind characters that are simply awful and entitled just because they want to be awful and entitled. I just don't with that, so I really didn't like her, and literally what was the point of her? And then lastly, I didn't like the portrayal of vampires. I didn't like that they were kind of zombie-ish creatures. I didn't like their incorporation into the books. Like, I feel like it could have been a different kind of unique monster. It didn't have to be vampires. I don't really like the vampires. Yeah. And the tropes were fated mate, touch her and you die, lost heir to the throne, and enemies to lovers, of course. And I do actually think this was enemies to lovers because they are just... he's just the worst. But, you know. And then my overall thoughts were this was such a good epic fantasy, a beautiful world building, unique magic system with things of collaboration. So needing to do the equivalent to exchange. It's very Full Metal Alchemist, and I liked that. Wonderful characters. I loved Lorith. There's a lot of good side characters, except for obviously the two that I mentioned is I did not like Kingfisher, and I do not like Denya. I loved the plot twists and the setup for the series. I wish they had expanded a little bit on Malcolm and Fisher. It sounded like there was more happening within that relationship, and so it would have been nice to see. It would have been nice to get a little bit more character dynamic, but I have lots of high hopes for Brimstone. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But yes, that was Quicksilver. I really enjoyed it. 4 out of 5. Next book that I read in 2025 was Onyx Storms. Now, I think myself, like the majority of others in the fandom, found that this was polarizing, and yeah. It wasn't bad. I gave it a 3 stars out of 5, but it's certainly, I think it ended very well. I think the pacing was a huge problem, but we'll obviously get into all of that as I like go through the journal and, you know, articulate my feelings about it. But truly, I don't know how much of my expectations are there for the rest of the series. I think that we need to get a little bit more on track. I think there's a lot going on and not anything going on at the same time. So anyways, but still 3 out of 5, maybe 2.5 now that I'm like reflecting backwards. But anyways, I wrote down 3 out of 5 and then a 0.5 of spice. Like, I think that when the spice was happening, it was like heavy spice, but it was not frequent enough and it wasn't like in depth enough to give it higher than that. It just really, they were doing a lot of the like, oh, he can't be around her, he can't touch her because otherwise he'll lose his soul even more and he'll be more of like the venom is taking over, etc., whatever. So, but anyways, what I enjoyed was the different perspectives. So at the end of the battle, they were doing POVs for a bunch of different of the characters, which actually really worked with the narrative of Violet having to kind of release control a little bit and sort of like let people help her. She's not the only one who can like be the savior, do the thing, and like succeed in saving the world. Like, she is letting people help her, which was really fantastic to see, like the physical storytelling in terms of switching those POVs within the like narrative of the story. So I thought that was a really beautiful component that Rebecca Yarros included. I thought that was super fun, and also it was really cool to like see the different perspectives of these characters. The character growth was really fantastic. Obviously Violet, Zeta not really. He's kind of deteriorating a little bit, but yeah, there was a lot of like good character interactions and character growth throughout the story. I hated the cliffhanger because I want to know who is also now turned to venom and who now is a part of Zayden's like deterioration as a person. That's why I'm gonna read the next book, because this one didn't really leave me. It's always fucking cliffhangers with Rebecca Yarros. She's so good at making a really fantastic conclusion that hooks you. Whereas, like, for most of this book, it was so political. I can't even, like, and I'm super dyslexic. Like, I can't pronounce most of these names. It was really stressful to, like, get through it. And there was just so much going on that felt so unprecedented. Like, it wasn't set up to make it so that made sense. I don't know. Yeah, it was just, there was too much. And it was nice exploring the larger world. As much as it was stressful and there was a lot to keep account of, it was cool seeing how she expanded so much on her world and how there's so much more than just the, like, Basquiat and, you know, the mainland. There's a globe, and that was cool. I really disliked the complicated plot going off the rails. It was too much and not enough time. Truly, it was too much and not enough time. And the amount of stuff that was trying to, like, get put in here and set up, and, like, it was just a lot. It was a lot, and there was a lot of convoluted, like, not well explained, out of nowhere, things that didn't even matter, and, like, even some of the, like, character deaths were really rushed. Like, it was just too many things and not enough time, because she really, like, Fourth Wing, so good. Iron Flame, okay, yeah, it was enjoyable enough. Onyx Storm was rough. But I want to love it because it's good, but it's needs reworking a little bit. Yeah, I think she would also really benefit from putting pronunciation guides on these. Pronunciation guides would have been fantastic. I love that she did, like, a here so you can remember a bunch of stuff. Here's everybody's dragons. Here's the riders for the dragons. Here's their, like, magic that they have. Here's the world leaders, like, information that you need to know because, you know, there's so much information. And so she, like, did a little recap of the important people that you need to know. However, she is not helping me out here. Like, I mean, even Quicksilver has a pronunciation guide of the names of the places and the names of the people. So, like, people, here to pronounce their names. Places, here's how you pronounce the names. Like, it's thoughtful, it's considerate, because obviously these are really extreme high fantasy books. The names are crazy, and like, Rebecca Yarros is using Celtic names. So it's very annoying for me, because I literally just end up, like, skipping over names and, like, I just skipped. So it was very frustrating. The ending felt very rushed. I didn't like how it was very speedrun. It was very, everything wrapped up really quickly, but also not, because there's so much, like, the cliffhangers and stuff. Like, I liked the ending, but I also didn't like the ending. It was very, very top heavy, and then the action really started closer to the end of the book. So there was so much, it dragged. It was really hard to, like, get into it again, because there's so much, like, political stuff and so much, like, bogged down with, like, lore dumping and information and trying to understand all of the different components of the world that are not, like, really organically explained, and it was all just very, like, bogged down at the beginning, and then all of the fun action stuff happens, like, at the very end of the book. And yes, of course, that makes me want to read the next one, because there is big reveals and stuff that are gonna happen, but it was such a chore. I think this put me into a bit of a reading slump for, like, a little bit of the year, and I needed some, like, really heavy side questy kind of books to get back into a good flow of reading, and I feel like I'm back in a good flow of reading, but oh my god, this was rough. So I wish that it was a better world state explanations, like, make it more simplistic and succinct so that people can actually get into it and really enjoy the experience, while also being able to have a good world experience. It was too much. Taking more time to process, so lore dumping and then jumping into the next lore dump and then jumping into the next lore dump, it wasn't effective, and I barely remember anything of the actual story, but I remember the end, which is not cool, because I remember Quicksilver is, like, the equivalent in terms of size of this book, but I remember what happened in Quicksilver. I don't have any fucking clue what happened in Onyx Storms, except for the very end. That's how much it stayed with me. That's pretty telling, I feel. So, and space for things to land. Again, it goes back to, like, if everything is rushed because you're trying to lore dump and you're trying to get all of this information out there, and like, this is book 3. We should have had these things start to come in these 2 books. We should have had Fourth Wing and Iron Flame do so much better to set all this stuff up so that we're not lore dumping and speed running and then it doesn't land because now I don't care and now it's just too much. So it was just too much, and it felt like we should have had this information get started here, and then we could move on, and then it wouldn't be so dense and just so much, because yeah, it was just too much. I feel like you either need to simplify your story or disperse the information better so that it's digestible and easily, you know, integrated into the story. So, and then my final thoughts were it needs better balance and meaningful details, because it was just a lot. It was just a lot, and it felt like nothing. I wrote down 3. I think it's a 2.5 at best. That was Onyx Storm. The next book that I read, I have fallen in love with this author so deeply, because I tell you what, Danielle Jensen was the sleeper winner of this year's reading. Danielle Jensen is just amazing, and I have so much of her books on my TBR for next year because she's just so incredible. I loved everything about this book for the most part, so let's get into it, because The Bridge Kingdom was fantastic. I loved the character development. I loved the world that was established, the descriptions, the environment, the strong detailed of everything. Like, everything was so well done and well articulated, and it was just so beautiful. I loved the characters. I loved Laura so much. I loved her dynamic with Aaron. I thought that this was just fantastic. So, really good characters, really amazing. It was such a well-written and developed story, incredible world building, really easy to follow, very clear. I loved Lyra as a strong character, but she's smart and self-aware. Like, I thought she was just very realistic and like a real personality trait character that was very well developed. Wonderful slow burn romance and really, really strong pacing. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars and 1.5 flames because there's only really like 2 scenes and they're not really detailed there very much. So it's really, like, I wouldn't consider this like a spicy book. I think that it's just a really strong fantasy book with a little bit of romance. Well, no, there's a lot of romance with a little bit of spice. I actually didn't write down anything that I didn't like about it. Is that true? I don't think I wrote down anything that I didn't like about it. I didn't write down anything that I didn't like about this. There was only one thing that I didn't like, that I remember that I didn't like, was that she didn't tell Aaron. Like, it's kind of the miscommunication trope a little bit, in terms of she didn't tell Aaron that she had, like, switched allegiances and that she had, like, planned previously to destroy the kingdom because her father had, like, set that up. And anyways, it was a whole thing. And so I didn't like that she didn't just communicate with him, because it could have changed so much of the disaster. However, it had to happen. There had to be that miscommunication because, or the lack thereof, total lack of communication, because that was what propelled the story forward. So I understand why it happened, but I just thought that it was really dumb and I hated that part of it. But I also understand that it needed to be there, so I'm not really perturbed about it that much, but I didn't like it. And then the tropes are just liar revealed, he falls first, and enemies to lovers, which I think it actually was like real enemies to lovers, because, well, at least on Laura's part, they were real enemies to lovers, because she was actively trying to like destroy his kingdom at the beginning of the series. So, you know. And then my final thoughts on this were, I loved the story, I loved the world, very immersive, and I liked the dual perspective of Lara and Aaron. It was overall super enjoyable. I really did, because you got very distinct characters and very distinct perspectives on what they're experiencing and where they're coming from, and I just really thought that both of them were such strong characters that it was nice to see how they were viewing the world and what their experiences were based on their experiences. So I really liked it. And then the vibes was very like fantastical historical fiction. There was no magic or like, well, not overt, well, I don't think there was really any magic in this. It was very just like a historical fiction of sort of a different world state. So yeah, is kind of like a fantastical historical fiction. I would still call it fantasy, but there was no magic. So, but yes, highly recommend this book. And then next, the sequel to The Bridge Kingdom was The Traitor Queen, which was fantastic also. This one I also gave 4 stars, and this one I gave 0.5 of a little flame, or 1. There was only one, like, mild explicit scene, and I felt like it wasn't egregious. Again, this series is really not like a spicy book. It's just a nice historical fiction style kind of fantasy with a beautiful romance. Very, very strong romantic story. I actually love Laura and Aaron. I have so many things that I loved. So, I loved the characters. They are so distinct and fully formed with who they are and how they respond based off of their beliefs and experiences. Particularly in the scene where they're in Laura's old, like, training facility, essentially, in the desert. And they're, like, scavenging for water and, like, talking about how, like, are they gonna go and, like, kill somebody for resources because they're, like, dying out in the desert, essentially. And Aaron's very distinctly like, no, that is wrong. We are not going to do that. Here's my moral compass. This is what I believe, and that's it. And Laura is a lot more like, well, you have to do what you have to do to survive. This is what I've been experiencing. This is, like, the torture that I've gone through. This is, like, all of the things that, you know, she's experienced in the world that has led her to, like, where her mentality goes with things. And, like, same thing with Aaron. Like, his experiences have dictate how he responds to things. So I really love that both of them are such strong independent characters and have such well-developed personalities. So fantastic character development. I loved the Lara the cockroach survivor. She's like it's really sad when you think about it very deeply, but I love that she is a fighter and she will always survive and get through anything, and that's, like, her nickname is Cockroach because she just always is able to, like, overcome any trial, and she'll always make it through and always survive. So I really loved that, like, description of her, because it's not really the same as, like, you know, when you're doing, like, Throne of Glass, for example, and Aelin is a survivor and she's, like, the fiery survivor that will overpower anything and she'll just burn everything in her path, and she can, like, you know, she'll always make it through. Whereas, like, Lara is really smart, and she, yes, is very strong and, like, trained to be an assassin, essentially, but she also is able to just differentiate between, here's when I should lie low, here's when I should attack, and here's how I'm gonna make it through the next bit. And it's not always overt, it's sometimes a little bit more quiet how she goes through different things. But I loved her as, like, a survivalist. The actions, the stakes, the battle scenes, all of the descriptions were really fantastic. I think the escape with all of the sisters and Aaron and Lara, when they're leaving Lara's father's palace, the whole thing, like, I was binging that section so fast because I was so, like, immersed into it, and, like, it just felt so intense and so incredibly, like, really immersive and connected. Like, I really loved the descriptions, and also just the experience of that action was fantastic. I loved the shark myth with Lara also. So, huge spoiler at the very end, when Lara is going and trying to help save the capital, or, like, the hidden capital of Aaron's kingdom, and she's literally in the water with a bunch of her, like, father's army is, like, dying in the water. There's blood everywhere, and, like, there's all the sharks in the water, and she makes it to land, and the sharks don't eat her because that means that she's, like, a real, like, protector and real, like, she has a real connection to Aaron's kingdom because the sharks let her live. And I just thought that was so amazing and triumphant, and I just loved that because, yeah, it just felt really, like, a really sweet thing to do. It was super, super obvious to do that, but, like, I just really loved it because it just felt so triumphant. And that's the point, right, is to, like, feel the feels. So, yeah, it was really good. I loved seeing the sisters get back together and seeing the different dynamics. So I have 3 sisters, and we all have different relationships with each other. Even within us being, like, sisters, I get along with each of them differently. We have different, like, inside jokes, we have different connections, we have different, like, depths of our relationships, because we're all different people and we all connected in different ways, and we're all adults now, so, you know? So I thought that it was such an interesting, like, I really loved seeing the sisters' dynamics because they're all different, they're all unique, they're all distinct, they all get along different with each other, they all have different levels of connectivity with each other, they all have very distinct and different personalities. It was very beautiful to see those sister dynamics because it felt very authentic and very well understood. I don't know if Danielle Jensen has siblings, but it feels like she certainly must have at least one sister because she really captures the dynamic of what that looks like and how that would play out. Like, I think that she did a really good job with representing the sisters very well. So I loved that. I loved the world. I loved the plot. I loved how perfectly everything gets explained. Nothing gets lost or gets confusing. It's a very well written, succinct, beautiful story that is just a beautiful story. I loved the deep emotionality and the consequences of actions, the morality and the moral debates that they have. Again, like how I was talking about, like, do they kill somebody for taking their resources or do they not, because, you know, they're dying but somebody else is, like, able to help them, and so that sort of thing, like, you know, self-preservation versus, like, moral high ground kind of stuff. And then depicting, like, the Aaron and Lara, like, learning the other person's perspectives. So, like, you know, she is the way that she is because of her experiences, and same with him, and so them seeing life from the other's perspective and being able to appreciate and understand where the other person is coming from was really beautiful, because it's, again, like, they're real characters, they're learning from each other, they're seeing things from different ways because of their exposure to different situations, and I just think that it was beautiful. I think both of them are such good characters, and yeah. I really, Danielle Jensen, man, highly recommend her. It was so good. There's really just a couple of things that I didn't like. It was, I really didn't like that Lara kept getting pissed on, like, literally a lot. Yes, she had messed up, and, you know, there are ramifications for her actions when she did betray Aaron, like, in the Bridge Kingdom book, but she didn't need to be kicked so much, and for neither home to accept her. Like, redemption, yes, love it. Bullying, no, stop it. Like, I really felt so uncomfortable, and I think that that was the point, though, but I really felt so uncomfortable when she was, like, with Aaron in, like, one of the desert cities, and she had been, like, observed to try and steal because they needed food, and then she gets, like, stripped naked, put into, like, stocks, where she's, like, literally in stocks, she's getting a huge sunburn, and somebody's literally peeing on her, and I was like, she didn't f*** up that badly where she should literally be getting pissed on. And yeah, I just felt like there was a lot of bullying on her character, and I feel like it wasn't deserved or necessary, because it also is one of those things that the messaging gets a little bit weird, because yes, she made a mistake, but she made that mistake based on that she believed and she was taught from childhood that Aaron's kingdom was the reason why her people were starving, and her betraying him and, like, her giving access to the bridge to her father so that they could, like, go and invade and, like, take the resources that she was told Aaron's kingdom was hoarding. She was doing everything from good intentions, and it's, you know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions is this very famous quote, but it's quite serious that, like, her whole mentality was, I'm going to protect my people and save my people, and then once she learned that she was wrong, she already tried to rectify the situation, so then to put her through all of that after is, like, for what? Because she already learned, and she's already going through the redemption arc. Like, why are we literally bullying her and literally pissing on her? It just felt superfluous and egregious in terms of her punishment for a betrayal that I think, yes, it was big, but it wasn't malicious. I don't know. I didn't like how they were treating her. And then I wish the book had been a little bit longer, but I also understand, like, always leave them wanting more. I think that it ended very beautifully, and, you know, it was beautiful story. It was a beautiful, like, duology with the two of them. It's great. There's more books in the world, which I am definitely going to read next year. But yeah, I really, I wanted more. I really loved this book, so yeah, I really liked it, and I want more of it. And then the tropes were pining, redemption, vengeance, journey, and enemies to lovers, again, because they really, yeah, at that point they were, again, enemies to lovers. And they had a redo of the romantic arc, and, you know, everything, happily ever after ensues after. But my final thoughts were, I loved this book, the world, the story, I want more. Beautiful love story of family, fighting for what's right, taking responsibility and holding on to your power, the power that's inside you all along. It moved very fast paced and was very efficient, good, well-written storytelling. It just, I think that it ticked all the boxes. It definitely is worth those 4 stars. Like, I really loved this book and this world and this series. So I'm excited to get into books 3 through 5, and then number 6 is also coming out next year, so I'm very excited for that too. But yes, Bridge Kingdom and Traitor Queen, highly recommend. And that concludes all the books that I read of physical copies of. Everything else this year I read on my Kindle. A few of these were just like whatever reads, so I'm gonna briefly touch on them, but there was like a series that I really loved that I did a full book review of, so we'll get there. But yes, for now, I read Kiss of the Basilisk. I should have just DNF'd it, I'm not gonna lie, but I committed and I read it, and it got 0.5 of a star, and then probably more than 5 little flames out of 5, but 5 little flames out of 5, but literally like not even a star, probably 0, but like whatever, I read it. This book was literally only for the spice and was not good. Tem was annoying, whiny, belligerent, and the wide shoes was really bad and hurtful to the love interests. It was like, why are you doing this? The plot was thin and rushed so fast. The spice was okay, but it was also like some really bad horror moments and grotesque. Yeah, they made some really bad choices. They did cannibalism, they did pelvis breaking during sex, which is awful, attempted assault, and then sex right after, which I thought was really gross, because why are you... yeah, okay. Very flat and dull book. All sex, no brain. Probably should have DNF'd, but it's a book down on my goal list, so, you know, but it was a waste to read for mid-spice. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. It was very bad, and pretty pointless. We're moving on. The next book that I read was A Game of Hearts and Heists. This one was lesbian romance, which was super good. It was dual POV with Quinn and Scarlet. It felt very rushed to get into the action and prioritize the romance over the characters as people separately. So it felt a little stereotypical over fully actualized characters, but it was pretty decent spice and decent banter. I gave it 3 stars and 3 little flames. But yeah, I liked the diversity with the body types. Quinn was a plus-size character. It was an interesting world concept. The magic system was from like the houses and was very unique and fun. Basically, this is like the world had split apart into 2, like 1 kingdom, 2 rulers. The world split apart with this map being split in half, and so then like half of the kingdom was like turned into like this dark section, and half of the kingdom is like this rich section. It's very like not even allegorical for poverty, it just was poverty. And yeah, so situations ensue. The side of like the like wealthy monarch wants this group of people to go and steal the map back so she can like reunite the kingdom and be the ruler by herself again. So that's basically the setup. And then yeah, the magic system comes from these like ancient houses, like literal houses, where you like join this house and you gain that magic power. So people can be like apothecary magic for like healing, or there's like one of the girls is like an assassin, one of the girls can do like time magic, one of them can do like secure like barrier magic and stuff like that. So there's like different, you join this house, which means you've joined this like collective, I guess, and then you get your powers from the house, and the house has to accept you, and it's sort of a sentient mansion thing. And yeah, so it was pretty fun. Like, it's a pretty fun concept. It was really fun story, but it was all just like, the women love women. We're on a fun romance journey. It's really not that deep. Yeah, it was just a fun urban fantasy. I personally, you know, like, it was what it was for what I was reading, but I prefer to have story over, like, I want substance and story over romance, and, like, I don't know, it can be character focused, because literally the Bridge Kingdom is so character focused and so beautifully done with those characters, even though it's also a romance, but it's focused on there's so much plot, and it's so very well done, whereas this was just, here's these two characters, I want to write a love story, and that's wonderful. It's just not really, like, my personal cup of tea. So I didn't like that the romance was prioritized over, like, genuine storytelling. There was a dumb miscommunication trope, Act 3 breakup, that was resolved way too fast to matter, because it was basically like, Quinn's dad was the guy who, like, ripped the map apart to, like, break up the two parts of the kingdom, and it was like a whole thing, and it destroyed, like, Scarlett's, like, family house. Anyways, it was super, like, whatever, it was a whole thing. It was a whole thing, and then they got back together super fast, so it didn't even matter. It was just there to be a trope, and it was kind of dumb. And it was very one-note characters. They felt very, like, stereotyped, and, like, it was just there to facilitate a romantic story, and then placed it in a cool fantasy, urban fantasy world, but it was very mid. Very mid. I wish that that it had been more fleshed out. I think that it could have been such a good story, because the idea was so good. I think the execution was just the problem. But yeah, it was a really short book with a big world and a big concept that it could have had so much more done with it if it wasn't just romantic forefronted. So yeah, it could have been really, really good, but I still, like, enjoyed it, but it wasn't a good book. And then some of the tropes were one bed, rivals to lovers, because they weren't really enemies. They were, you know, grumpy ex grumpy, not grumpy ex sunshine. They were both very grumpy individuals. Touch her and you die. I hate you, but they're actually in love. But yeah, a game of hearts and heists. 3 out of 5 stars and little flames. Yeah, very mid, very middle of the road. Nothing grand, but also nothing super offensive. But then, I think, aside from the Bridge Kingdom books, this was my favorite reads of 2025. Because I tell you what, the Shadow of the Tenebris Court series was so good. Now, I did a really intense deep dive with this review in Bookended, so that'll be linked also up top. For your viewing pleasure, if you should so choose. But, like, I loved this series. I wouldn't call these, like, good books in terms of, like, writing, and, like, I would say that the Bridge Kingdom books are actually, like, very good books. They were very well written. They were very well articulated. It was very, like, good writing. The Shadow of the Tenebris Court was not, but I loved it anyways, because I just enjoyed the story, and I thought all 3 books were really good. It's a little trilogy, and it is A Kiss of Iron, A Touch of Poison, and A Promise of Lies. So for A Kiss of Iron, I'll go very briefly, and then if you want to, you can watch the in-depth review later on. But yeah, A Kiss of Iron, 3.5 stars, 3.5 flames. It's very court intrigue, slow burn, a lot of trauma. Catherine doesn't really start out as, like, a strong woman, but then she eventually learns her value, and she finds the strength to be herself and sort of come into her own despite her patriarchal suppression, because the human world is all very male-dominated. I loved the folklore-accurate fae. So again, the, like, you can't lie, the depictions of the fae, the, like, they can't create, the whole, like, it was very medieval Scotland, like, alternative medieval Scotland. So yeah, it was very good. I loved the older FMC because Kat is, like, in her 30s, and I loved that this was an adult fantasy that was actually an adult fantasy. It's not like a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old. She's 30. We love to see it. Very interesting story. Loved that it was set in ancient Scotland. Very strong spice. Very good female main character and supportive characters, and the trauma depictions I thought were really good. And that the author actually cared about how she was depicting these things and wanted to do it accurately, but also respectfully and with care. So I thought that was really important. I disliked that there was just too much going on. It was a lot of sidetracking and trying to fit all the ideas in. The writing style was a bit messy. Things got resolved very fast, way too fast to count, and or out of nowhere. I wished for more focused and succinct storytelling. Like, here's your idea, here's the execution, keep it on track and keep it focused. The tropes were forced proximity, liar revealed, arranged marriage, touch her and you die, one bed, finding her power, praise kink, and resistant to love. Because they aren't rivals to lovers, they aren't enemies to lovers, they just are both sort of like put into a position where they're having to interact with one another, and then through some shenanigans, they eventually do fall in love, even though they are like, I can't fall in love with you because my kingdom, it needs to not have me actually love you, but I have to seduce you, so yeah. And then my final thoughts are, I really enjoyed the story. The pace was pretty decent. I liked the action, and I liked Kat coming into her own. Yeah, I really highly recommend this book. It is definitely like a commitment book. You kind of have to get through it a little bit to get into like the really good stuff, but yeah. It's not like a good book, but I really loved it. And then next was A Touch of Poison. I read this series very quickly. I read all 3 books right after the other because I actually really enjoyed it. This is what really, this and The Bridge Kingdom really snapped me out of my Onyx Storms slump, because I tell you what, it was very difficult, but I really enjoyed this and I really enjoyed The Bridge Kingdom, and that was like the top tier of this year for books. But next was A Touch of Poison. I gave this one 3 stars and 2 little flames. So this one was, there was a huge tone shift between this book and the last book. It was a bit disjointed, but as we get on, it was very good, and the core intrigue and the mystery and the plotting and the pining was all very good. But yeah, it felt very like I remember thinking like, oh, I went from like a fantastical kind of like Bridgerton, but like murder mystery plot kind of thing, into a buddy cop scenario in the first chapter. Like, what the first chapter that we get in A Touch of Poison was like Bastion, who's the male main character, and his bestie like going and doing a thing for their queen that was trying to figure out who was like vandalizing a bridge or something because there's like an evil group who's like trying to depose the monarchy, and they're like drawing their symbol on public property, and I was like, oy, I guess we're in a buddy cop drama now. But no, it doesn't stay like that. It was just a very weird, disjointed introduction to this book. So yeah. But yeah, no, overall it was very good. And then I loved the relatability of Kat. Kat is not just a perfect person. She really has flaws and she needs to grow and learn. So I thought that was really beautiful. She really takes the opportunity to have that character development and to improve herself as she goes along, which is really, really beautiful. I loved the environment. Once we get into Tenebris Luminous, like the Fey realm is just fantastic. Way more interesting than when we're in the human world in the first book. I think that like really these books improve so much as we go along, so I really enjoyed the progression, and that's why progressively the books get better as we go, and I rate them higher as we go. Love the fantasy scape. Like, again, once they get into the Fey realm, it's just a delight. I loved Kat coming into herself and her healing journey. It was really beautiful to see. I loved Bastion. I think he actually might be one of my favorite male love interests in all of literature at this point. He is just such a like good person as a character, and he just loves Kat and he's never mean to her, and it like literally the bare minimum, but then he like, I don't know, he just is such a good love interest in the sense that he is a good person who is good for this other person, and they help each other and they grow, and they just, I don't know. I really loved their dynamic. I really loved them as characters. And then I loved, big spoiler, I loved that Kat killed Robin because it was just such a, like, she killed her abusive husband. She got to, like, gain her own autonomy. She fought back. She didn't just, like, let this person abuse her. Like, she was really fantastic. Like, that was such a triumphant and beautiful moment. Big disclaimer for this series, though, is there's a lot of trauma. Like, read the trigger warnings before you go in here. There is no SA, like, it's the bare minimum. There is no, like that kind of assault, but there is a lot of heavy material, so definitely, like, make sure that you want to partake before you partake. And then what I didn't like was the regression of the love story. They basically started it over and then did it again. So all of the development that they had done, they needed to, like, scrap and then do a take two kind of a situation. It was all very much like a, well, you did this to me, and then it was a, well, you did this to me, and then they both thought that the other was, like, irreparably angry at them, and then they had to have a lot of communication, which they did, and it was beautiful. And I love that they had such good communication once they got there, but the regression of the love story was really annoying. But they do it for the plot, so I guess whatever. And it did end up being a fantastic story, so, you know, it just had its moments at the beginning. And then I wished that there was stronger consistency within the writing style and the tone. It does get better immensely as the series continues. Like, you can really tell that the author is improving and doing better. It's a commitment series. You gotta kind of just, like, go with it as it is and appreciate what it is for what it is, rather than, you know, having very high expectations. But, no, I really, really enjoyed this series. It's just a little bit of a enjoy it for what it is, not any expectations outside of it being what it is. And then the tropes were slow burn, female rage, and then basically everything from book one. And then my final thoughts were, I was very engaged as the story went on. It was a clunky start, but it ended with a bang. It really is a good story. I'm very into the world and the magic system and the creativity of this series. So, yeah. I really enjoyed it. It's just a bit clunky, but it really does improve as it goes. And then the last of the trilogy, A Promise of Lies, was 4.5 stars out of 5, and Two Little Flames out of 5. The thing with the, like, spice in this one was, it's, like, there's not a lot of it, but when there is, it's like ghost pepper. It's a lot. So, again, check the triggers, check the, like, all the warnings and all that stuff, but it is really good. Like, the story as a whole is really good. There's just a couple of things that could be a barrier from people enjoying this series. But jumping straight into the story from exactly where book 2 left off, right into the action, where we are picking up from exactly when Catherine goes into the Dawn Court. The pacing was so good. I read this so quick. The stakes felt really high, and I cared a lot about what was happening, and I was pulled into the plot and the tension. And, like, both characters, so this one splits into a dual POV with Bastion and Catherine, whereas, like, the first book was just Catherine's POV, but the second and third are dual POV. And oh my gosh, it was so good. And I actually cared a lot about what Bastion and Catherine were going through. So it was never a situation of, like, oh, like, I don't want to be reading this person's story or this side of the plot. Like, there's, you know, it was always like, I'm really excited to be here with Bastion, and then I'm really excited to be there with Catherine, and it was just, like, perfect. So I really loved the story and the setup of the story. And for this, actually, I have 2 full pages, whereas every other book that I read this year only had, like, 1 page of notes, in terms of, like, even the Traitor Queen, which I also really loved, only had 1 page. Bird Kingdom only had 1 page. Promise of Lies has 2. That's gonna tell you, it's gonna tell you a lot. I had a lot to say about this, and I had a lot of things that I loved about this book. So, I loved the pacing and the dual POV. It kept me engaged the whole time. I loved both Catherine and Bastion. The stakes were really high and they had meaningful consequences. The foreshadowing paid off so hard in this book. It was so good from the whole series as well. So it was like, even things that, you know, you're like, ugh, what, like, that's such a little throwaway thing. Like, no, things actually like mattered and then paid off, which was really cool to see. I loved that queerness was just normalized. Like, there was no commentary on it. There was no like gravity placed onto it. It was just characters were able to just exist and be, and it was delight. It was just a delight. I really was excited to see. They didn't make like a thing about it. It was just, here's some queer characters. I love it. Normalize queerness. Love Kat and Bastian as a couple. I think they are one of my favorite book couples, like, ever now, because I just thought that they were so well written together, and they actually just depict like a really healthy adult relationship where they communicate and they talk and they listen to each other and try to understand from the other person's perspective, and they actually give care and understanding and respect and love, and it's just like the bare minimum, but but like in the best way and in the most like healthy and still like romantic and beautiful way. But they're actually just a really good couple, and I think that's super rare because, you know, we love Rhysand, we love Rowan, we have all of our traditional book boyfriends, but like Bastian, the sleeper hero, he truly is like so good. And I love the adult fantasy of the adult fantasy. So again, like, these characters, there's no age gap as well. Like, Bastian is also like in his 30s, Kat is in her 30s, like they are just adults in adult fantasy, and it really is just articulating that your adventures don't stop after you leave your 20s. Like, you're still going to be able to go on fantastical journeys, and things are still going to be exciting and happen in your life. It's not just about being like 19 or 20 and then here's all the things that happen and then nothing happens for you after when you grow into the next phases of your life. Like, no, I really love that they're like in their mid-30s and they're like, we're going on adventures, we're learning new things, we're trying new things, and like, yeah, we need more like adults in adult fantasy and representation like that. So I really loved that. There's only two things that I didn't really like, which were just Cyrus. He felt very Joffrey from Game of Thrones, very generic bad guy. It wasn't that serious, like, okay. And then I didn't like that Brea died twice. I feel like it was unnecessary and it just pulled away from like the plot, because I felt like this series in this book suffered a little bit of like the multiple ending wrap up kind of thing. Like, the author was trying to do just like too many things at once, and so it kind of didn't help to make it like a succinct, strong conclusion. And I just think, yeah, like there was like 3 fake out deaths in the book. It just was too much. So yeah, but just the 2 things realistically. And then I wish that there was just like a stronger true ending. There was just a lot of wrap ups and so many endings that it just felt a little bit indulgent. Like, I think that was the one thing that this author was like suffered from a little bit in her writing, was that she was just a bit too self-indulgent. Like, she tried to include every little thing that she wanted to include, and it just kind of messed with the flow of the storytelling a little bit. So I feel like the ending should have just been the end and stopped and been the ending. But I do also understand that like she was trying to facilitate this beautiful full circle moment, so doing all the wrap-ups and then getting to the ending, but it just felt a bit too much. So what are you gonna do? I don't think the book ultimately suffered that much from it. It just, the last note was a little bit weaker than it could have been if it was more like to the point. So, but yeah, I'm being very picky about that, because I did ultimately like really, I mean, this was my highest rated book of this year, so clearly I loved it. But again, like, it's not like a good book, but I really loved it. So yeah, that's where we're at. And then the tropes are long lost heir discovered, plots against the kingdom, and then very similar to books 1 and 2, the tropes kind of carried over. But then my final thoughts on this were A Promise of Lies was a fantastic book, and I was so happy with the plot twists and the foreshadowing that came together. It felt like it was the perfect conclusion to the series, and that it was very strong. I think that Claire Sager really improved her writing with each of the books, and that this was very well done, very satisfying, and very engaging. I love, and more importantly, I liked Kat and Bastian as characters in the book. I loved the representation in this book of all of the different things that we already talked about. And yeah, they felt like really good developed characters. So I really enjoyed. All 3 books are free on Kindle Unlimited. Like, highly recommend those books. But yeah, definitely check to see if that's something that would be good for you to read before you read it. Because there's some heavy stuff. I felt like all of the heavy stuff was really dealt with very respectfully and with the intention of catharsis rather than not exploitation, like not using like trauma in order to be like sensationalized. It's really using it in terms of supporting a character and showing the process of healing and showing like the worst parts of the impact of these things, and then what happens when you start to do the internal work and you have a support system and you go through the inner dialogue of growth and healing. So yeah, I feel like it was done very well, but this character is heavily abused by a lot of the men in her life. So proceed at your own discretion. Like, don't read it if it's not going to be something that's healthy for you to read. But yes, we continue on. Book number 10 of the year was The Secrets of Jane Forgotten. This book was a recommendation to me, but I enjoyed it. I checked it out, and it was, again, I feel like, you know, this year I didn't really read a lot of good books, and I want to really change that next year and be a lot more picky about what I'm reading, because I felt like this year was a lot of just like, oh, I'll just read like whatever looks kind of like interesting or what's been recommended or what's like popular or stuff like that, and it really didn't serve me very well this year. So I am going to curate my TBR a lot more strictly next year and a lot more intentionally. And I have the first 6 books on my TBR that are physical books from my TBR up there. We'll get into that at the end of this episode. But yeah, I want to read like good books next year, because I feel like a lot of this is just like filler books, which were still enjoyable. Most of them were still enjoyable, but I want to read good literature. I don't really want to just read like throwaway things, which was kind of Secrets of Jane. It was by no means like a not good book, but it wasn't like fantastic. But I gave it 3 stars. It was a like pirate adjacent story of a girl born to a world of warlords and mercenaries that was on the run from the council her father was trying to protect her from, until fate brings her back to the world of her childhood, where she must survive and navigate protecting herself while falling in love with her captor. It's very classic romantasy, but I liked the interesting story concept. I liked Jane and Soren's relationship, the falling for the brutal and the gentle side of each other, so they're both like flawed and they both have, you know, different characteristics, and they both come to really enjoy each other for the good, the bad, and the ugly kind of thing. So I enjoyed that. It was a really engaging world concept. I liked the sort of pirate-esque world while also kind of being like a medieval fantasy kind of vibe. I engaged with the world environments really, like it was really beautiful descriptions of the environments. It was a really cool magic system and pretty decent side characters. I liked Jane's friend and Soren's lackeys, like in his crew, you know. Yeah, it was great. It was fine. I did not like the repetitive dialogue. It was very repetitive. The descriptions, the information as a whole, and it read like a fan fiction, sort of. It was constantly retelling you the same information and the rumination of Jane in terms of like, oh man, like having to escape. And like, yes, there's, of course, she's like, oh my gosh, I have to escape my captor, and that's going to be the motivation, but it was just very repetitive in how that was being articulated, and it didn't serve very well. So I didn't particularly enjoy the way that the story was being told, even though the story itself was interesting. It really did sort of read like a fan fiction. So I wish that it had been more succinct. I wish that it had have trusted the reader a little bit more to follow and remember the details without needing to constantly remind us of the plot points. How many times do you need to tell me that her father is like disappeared or dead, or, you know, that like how many times do you have to tell me that she is like this kind of person, like, how many times do you need to repeat the information? Like, it's just not necessary, and it really bogs down the pacing, because, okay, if I've already learned that, like, I already know this, and it's not even that well, I don't know if this, because there is a second book, so I'm not sure if, like, that kind of stuff is, like, being put in there so that eventually when the author does do, like, reveals or plot twists or whatever it is, that, it's like, oh, well, here's all of the foreshadowing because I kept repeating myself or whatever, you know, but it was just too much. Like, you have to trust your reader to follow your story and to be in the story. And it just felt like the writer didn't trust the reader to be smart enough to understand what's happening or to remember these details that are literally, it's not even that serious. Like, the book was less than 400 pages. It's not that deep. I don't know. It really stole the pacing. So I didn't like that. And then the tropes was, again, reluctance to love. I don't think that it's enemies to lovers. They're really, like, I don't think that Jane has a lot of negativity for Soren. I think it's just, like, she's like, oh, well, you know, he was, like, told to come and capture me by the council. Like, you know, he's doing his job, too. So, I don't think it's enemies to love. I would say reluctance to love. Pining, touch her and you die, and they're both broken and deadly. And then final thoughts. It was a fun story, good spice. I had to just surrender to the mid-level writing to be able to enjoy it. I do really like the story idea, the writing style was just not it. So the story itself is fine, but it just was very, it was just very. So that's really it. It was very mid, but not like, it wasn't bad, it was just mid. Next, again, this is again, like, articulating that I read very lackluster books this year, and I definitely want to, like, read proper good books next year, because the next one is called Betrayer, and it was 2.5 stars, and it was 1 flame, but seriously, like, I also should have DNF'd this. And I shouldn't have read the sequel, but alas, here we are. Betrayer is a elemental magic world linked with precious stones. The tribes are at war with the Bloodstone for how they once ruled with cruel magic. Sol is the main character. She is on a revenge quest to avenge her mother's murder. It gives, it's giving kind of like medieval adult Avatar a little bit, like Avatar: The Last Airbender, with morals and conviction swaying. This one's, again, kind of a little bit fanfiction-y and very, like, messy. I liked the world building. I liked the twist at the end with Hector, and I liked the magic system, but that was about it. I have a lot of things that I disliked. The tropes, though, were vengeance quest, enemies to lovers, forced proximity / arranged marriage kind of thing, liar revealed, slow burn, and pining. I didn't like, also, the repetitive rumination. The inner dialogue of Sol was the same constant repeating of, like, oh, he's my enemy, but I'm kind of falling in love with him, and blah, blah, blah. Like, it was just the exact same inner monologue, like, over and over and over. I was like, oh my god. Annoying FMC. Like, Sol was, like, so annoying in her rumination. It was a writing issue rather than her being unlikable, and the constant focus of sex being linked to intimacy and Sol's insecurities about not being desirable is just, like, it was too much. Maybe I'm just too old now for this kind of stuff, because it's just like, but it's just like, stop, it's so annoying. And I wish that there had a writing, because it could have been a really interesting story, it could have been a good book, but it was just like a discount shitty Katara, to be honest. So yeah, it wasn't good. And my final thoughts were, it had so much potential, but very, very poor execution. It could have been such a good commentary on the problems of prejudice, but it fell short, and it was repetitive, and it focused too much on the wrong things. So yeah, it could have been good. It could have been a great commentary on, because it really was very Avatar: The Last Airbender, but like adults. It could have been a really good commentary on, like, prejudice and revenge and morals, and, you know, because there is all of that stuff, because obviously the Bloodstone people think that they're right, but then, like, the other tribes, like, think that they're wrong, because of course, like, they perceive their magic as cruelty. But, like, is it all people who are bad just because they're born into a society that taught them badly, Or is it the society and the people are not bad, even if they believe bad things? Like, there's so much commentary on, like, society and, like, how that could have been managed, but it just completely fell short, and it was just not good. Anyways, 2.5 stars. And then I read the sequel. I read the second book. And there is a third book, and I probably will finish it just to finish it because I'm a little bit of a completionist, but I also feel like I need to start actually DNFing things. I did DNF for the first time this year in my whole life because I am such a committer. So if I start, then I'll, like, want to continue, but there was, I can't remember, it was something about the oak tree. I'll put the one that I DNF'd. I can't remember the title now. But it was just so bad. It was such a bad start. So I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm not gonna even entertain this because it was just, I'm done. But not with this one. I read Captive. Again, all of the free on Kindle. So here I went. This was a 2 stars and it was 1.5 flames. Soul travels with Hector after healing him from the stab wound she inflicted. They go to another Bloodstone city and build more of the relationship, but as they grow closer, their fates pull their paths apart. I liked the world building and the story idea again. Like, there is so much that could be done with this story. It's just the execution is horrendous. Consequences of actions and choices with the emotional war within Soul, and I liked Praxis's sacrifice. It really was very rushed sacrifice, but I liked the friendship that was built, and then, you know, he jumped in front of her getting hit with a dagger, so yeah. And then I can't even hear the word surcoat ever again without being so triggered and angry now, because it was just the repetitive wording, the repetitive writing. Surcoat is now a trigger word because it's literally every 2 seconds. My surcoat, like, swished against my legs. The surcoat flipped across the floor. His surcoat danced around his legs as he moved through the space. Like, fucking shut up. Stop. Use different adjectives. Use different words. Pick different clothing. Pick different, like, it was literally just grating on my brain because the writing is so bad. I cannot recommend this series. I enjoy the concept, but I feel like it needed to go through like 10 more editors, like so much more processing, and it's just not good. And this, I think, actually got worse than the first one, didn't it? Yeah, it did, by 0.5 of a star, because this deteriorated, and it became, again, like, it became so much more, again, about the physical intimacy of the relationship rather than literally anything else. Literally anything else. And it doesn't have to be. And, you know, like, I understand, because Kiss of the Basilisk was, like, literally just spice. Like, that was the purpose of that book, was just to be spice. This, though, was not. And this was supposed to be about more, and about, like, the prejudices of society, and about, like, you know, this group of people thinks that they are more meant to rule because of their ancestry and because of their, like, historical teachings and the precedents of, like, you know, here in the god system that they have, and, like, there's so much more, but it was just such trash writing. But it was very fast-paced. There was no, like, filler stuff. It was very to the point, but it was just so repetitive that I actually can't. It was just bad. The dialogue was very weak. It didn't sound realistic to how people talk. The character interactions didn't feel authentic. They were all just very, like, for the purposes of, like, getting information out and, like, you know, having a reason for, like, Soul to get mad. And there was so much conflict between her and Hector that was so forced, because it was, like, both of them, like, deciding to be angry rather than hearing each other. And, like, again, there's a way to write that where it's poignant and feels like, you know, organic or authentic to that character, or there's, like, a point for that character and, like, why they're constantly mad and what, but, like, this was just forced conflict, and it wasn't good. And then entirely the conflict between Soul and Hector, like, just communicate, you know, because I was spoiled with the fantastic representation of relationships and communication when I was reading the Shadow of the Tenebris Court series. Like, Promise of Lies, man, that's the kind of like actual relationship that I want in my life with someone who listens to me, who talks with me, who like wants to be there to hear me rather than just like, I want to get mad and so I'm gonna listen to you and then I'm gonna fight you about it. Like, this was trash. This was hot garbage, and I should have DNF'd this also. Truly, it was not good. And then the tropes were pining, touch her and you die, revenge, stubborn, no communication, star-crossed lovers. And then my final thoughts was, this series could be so much better with a stronger writing style and better diverse descriptions. Soul is very annoying, and the repetitive rumination just kills. It's just so bad. It's the same arguments with Hector every single fucking time they talk to each other, and it's like, get somewhere. Make there be a point of this conflict. Like, that's the whole point of a conflict, is to progress a story, have the point of a story. And it's just like, if you keep having the same argument again and again, and then they fix it with physical intimacy, this is not a healthy representation of anything, and there's no commentary on it. Like, it's just a horrible representation of a relationship, and it's just depicting something that we should not be, like, normalizing. It's not something that we should be, like, promoting in terms of how you deal with people in conflict, and the communication styles. It's just bad. It's tired and boring and dull. It's so disappointing because the concept is so good, but the execution is just trash. It was just bad. And then lastly, my last book of the year, which was actually so good, and I read it with my sister. We did like a double read. It was also on Kindle Unlimited, which is super nice. But it was called While the Dark Remains. This was so good. I was so pleased to read it. I loved this book. I loved that I got to do a little mini like winter book club with my sister, and we just had such a good time with it, and it was so good. So, While the Dark Remained was 4 stars and 0 flames. There was no spice in this book. There is like a little bit of a romance subplot, and there is like a kiss, but there was no spice, which was a little bit refreshing because I had a lot of egregious spice this year, and there's nothing wrong. We all love a little bit of spice, but it was just, I want plot and substance to be the priority. Thank you. For like 99% of the time. The premise of While the Dark Remains. 3 kingdoms are vying for power and control over an ancient power to reign over the world. Brynja, which I hope I'm saying correctly, Brynja plots with her companions to kill her childhood tormentor and bring peace to the world. This is such a good, again, story journey of this woman who is going on a quest to kind of take back her autonomy and sense of self and sense of self-worth and being. And it's just really beautiful, like the healing journey that she goes through, and also how her journey impacts the other people around her. And it's just a very good commentary on vying for power, and what does power mean, and what does power look like, and why do people strive so much to obtain power, and what is it about power that is so tantalizing, essentially. Like, why are people so invested in oppressing others to gain a sense of control? Yeah. No, it was such a fantastic commentary and such a fantastic book. I loved Brynja's journey for her place of belonging and familial acceptance. She goes through this, like, because her whole, like, backstory at the beginning of the book is that she, for 10 years, was locked away in this cage, being a captive of an evil king, and so, like, when she gets out of that cage and she goes to, like, she wants to kind of reunite with her family, but she can't find her family, and there's like a bunch of stuff going on with that, and so then she kind of makes her own family, this other person that she helped escape from the evil king's captivity as well. And so the two of them sort of like foster this really intense relationship, and so it's her journey of like acceptance and a place of belonging after such a huge traumatic experience in her life, especially going from like 10 up until the age of 20 being a captive of a cruel tormentor, like, you know. So it was really beautiful to like see that journey, and the trauma and healing from abuse was, some of the stuff hit so hard and was so beautifully done. The writing was also amazing. I loved the word choices and the style. I think like this was actually a very good book. I would say that this was super well written, super well paced, super well detailed, and it was actually just a good book. The world building and the magic system were super fun. Like the pantheon that this writer created was really beautiful. It kind of felt like Norse mythology a little bit, which I love, so that was a bonus. I loved the amazing plot twist. That was crazy. I literally didn't see it coming, but then when you go back into the book, like, you see, like, exactly, it totally made sense. Everything checked out. There was no, like, wild, like, oh, that came out of nowhere. Like, you can see the foreshadowing once you know, but it was so well done. It was beautiful. I didn't see it coming. I really liked Ball and Brynja's relationship. That was really fun. Like, they were kind of bonding as they were both going through this trauma as children, and then they, like, grew and developed into understanding and care for each other, and then it grew into a different kind of love. But it all felt very well done and sensible, rather than just like, I like you because you also were traumatized. It's like they both can find understanding for each other as people, which is really nice. I loved the setting. I loved the environment, the god system. The pacing was very beautiful. It was a very strong, hopeful ending. It was very grand, and it had some very epic action sequences, which I thought was just fantastic. Like, it was very beautiful, high stakes, both in terms of emotionality and internal struggle for Brynja, but also high stakes for the world as a whole. So I thought it was just very, very well done. And I liked it a lot. But I disliked Saga. I thought that she was very controlling and annoying. Like, leave Brynja alone and let her make her own choices. Like, I can understand that Saga was also going through her own stuff, her own trauma, her own shenanigans, if you will. But, like, I felt like Saga being so controlling about Brynja's connection with Ball was just, like, that's not a good friend. I don't think that Saga was a good friend. Like, yes, she did some good friend things in terms of, like, helping Brynja come into her family and, like, giving her acceptance and love, and, you know, but it was all, it's a little bit transactional. It's a little bit like, oh yeah, you helped me escape from the captor, but now, like, because I'm doing all these nice things for you, I get to control your life a little bit. Because she really pushes for, like, Brynja and her brother Vil to get together. And she's, like, super nosy about everything to do with, like, Brynja's love life or, like, feelings and all that shit. And it's like, can we please just leave Brynja alone so that she can deal with her own feelings, so that she can, like, experience her own stuff and stop being so controlling and dictating for this woman. Like, leave her alone. I really didn't like Saga. I feel like she was not a girl's girl, and I wasn't having it. I have no wishes for this book. I really liked it, and there's nothing that I wanted really to change, because I just really enjoyed this book, and I think that the author did a very good job at telling the story that she wanted to tell. And I'm excited for the sequel book, which I will be reading next winter. It's called When the Light Returns, and me and my sister are doing another like winter book club for that, so that'll be my next year's December read, which I'm very excited for. I think it's gonna be fantastic. And then the tropes were Liar revealed, the power was within you all along, warring kingdoms, friends to lovers, and then a revenge arc. And then my final thoughts were amazing story, beautiful writing, very immersive world, amazing storytelling about rewriting your own story as your worst experiences do not define you. And then I loved the healing journey and gaining personal independence over needing approval from others. I loved it. It was so good. And then my favorite, I added, going forward, I'm going to add my favorite quotes as well. So my favorite quote from this book was, "What will you do when I'm dead?" And then Brynja says, "Be free." I felt like it hit so hard. Obviously, it's out of context as I am reading it, so please enjoy. But I do highly recommend While the Dark Remains. It's free on Kindle Unlimited, so if you have a Kindle, you gotta read it. It's so good. And the sequel is literally coming out in, I think, May of 2026, so realistically, it's not even that long. Me and my sister have planned to do our, like, winter book club thing together, so that's why we are gonna wait until our winter book club to read When the Light Returns, but it's gonna be so good. I'm so excited, and I highly recommend. And that was my 2025 reading recap and book review. But just quickly before we head out, my first book of 2026 is going to be Callie Hart's This Equal to Quicksilver, because Quicksilver was my first read of 2025. I thought, what better way to start off 2026 other than having Brimstone? And then it's going to be a Danielle Jensen year for me, because I'm going to read A Fate Inked in Blood and A Curse Carved in Bone. And then I also want to read the next two in the Bridge Kingdom. And then I'm also going to read The Night and the Moth. And then those are the 6 physical books on my TBR. And then I do have, like, obviously on Kindle, While the Light Remains in December for that. And then I have a couple other ones on my Kindle that are gonna kind of be a mood read for the year. But yeah, that's essentially the plan. My goal is going to be, again, to do 12 books. I think 1 book per month is realistic for me. So I'm going to keep that as my standard in terms of my reading. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, this has been such a beautiful journey. Thank you all so much for watching, and thank you all so much for coming along on this journey with me. It's been very exciting. I just started YouTube in, I think it was March of this year. I think my first video came out in March, and it was a bookish video actually, which is really fun. It was the psychology of the Archeron sisters in terms of Fight Flight Freeze. So I do have quite a bit of bookish content on here. I would like to do more in 2026 for sure, but I really appreciate everybody who has been joining me on this adventure so far. It's been really exciting, and I'm very excited for going into the new year and doing a lot more videos. I have a lot of ideas for different kind of content, but yeah, I really hope that you all enjoyed. Let me know what your TBR is for 2026 and any books that you really enjoyed reading in 2025. I would love to hear any recommendations of really good, strong stories. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, consider giving a like and subscribing to join us on all of our adventures. But with that, thank you all so much for watching. Everything with love, and we'll see you next time in the treasure trove. Happy New Year! Bye!